Welcome back, everybody. We're actually starting a new series entitled Managing Your Emotions. And so, as you know, at Dream Company Movement, we're always about helping you to discover, to pursue, and to fulfill your personal and professional aspirations, to fulfill your purpose, to reach your full potential. And so, we are continuing in that same vein with various topics that will help you succeed. Not just strictly from a spiritual perspective, but also things that are going to help you make more money, to help you, of course, today we're talking about managing your emotions, which of course can affect your money, can affect your relationships, can affect your ability to spot opportunities and take advantage of them. If you can't control yourself, if you allow your emotions to consume you and to run you, then clearly that's a bad thing. And so we're going to be talking about how to not only identify what emotions are, but what creates them and how we can properly manage them. Because otherwise, we're just creatures of pure instinct, and that's not how God made us to operate. We're not supposed to just be reacting, to everything. Things are happening, and we just react. There's no thought, there's no processing, there's no time taken to properly interpret and gather facts and get the correct information so that we can make an educated decision about what needs to happen. So we want to respond to things, not react. And so again, today's lessons, we're probably going to have 2 or 3 of these, maybe 4, just helping us to understand, how to deal with these things called emotions. It's like, and if when you do a study on these, if that's something you're inclined to do, you'll figure out that there's a lot of controversy over what emotions actually are. And so I want to make it clear up front that everything we do here at Dream Company is faith-based. It's based on the Bible. We are believers in Jesus Christ, and so everything will be taught from that perspective. But it also will be something that there'll be principles that you can utilize regardless of your faith. So I don't want you to be discouraged or turned off by the fact that I'm a believer. It's like, fruit is fruit. If it works, it works. It doesn't have to. You don't have to be going to church in order to utilize the things that I'm going to share with you. Obviously, I believe that you should. But the point of this is to empower you regardless of who you are, what you believe. We at Dream Company Movement, we want you to succeed. We want you to fulfill your purpose, not just because you believe what I believe or think how I think, but we're sharing principles that will make everybody successful and that will all, that will make a world a better place. If you're happy, if you're doing the thing that makes you happy, if you're able to fulfill your potential, that's a great thing. You are being a blessing to a whole bunch of people around you, and that makes the world a better place. If every person is doing what they were put here to do, how could the world not be better for it? And so we want to make sure that if you have any questions or anything of that nature, please drop questions in the questions down below on YouTube. Also, if you can also follow us on Facebook, Dream Company Movement, which is actually, you can find it easily by going to Dreamco 2918. You can follow us on Twitter and on Instagram by doing the same thing. So let's get into it. So like I said, we're going to be talking about how to properly manage our emotions. So the first thing we need to do is talk about, I want to throw a couple principles at you. The first principle is one I learned from someone that I think is a great mentor and educator and preacher and minister and leader, is Dr. Miles Monroe, which you'll hear me, people who know me know, you'll hear me quote a lot of stuff from books and things that he's read, sermons that he's preached, because he has that same type of vision about empowerment and about helping people fulfill their purpose. And so the principle I want to share with you that I think is universal is, when the purpose of something is not known, abuse is inevitable. When the purpose of something is not known, abuse is inevitable. You cannot properly manage something if you don't understand what it's for and how it works. Period, right? That's not really that complicated. If I don't understand what a stove is for and how it works, I can potentially abuse that stove, if I don't understand how fire works, or if I don't understand how my car works, if I don't understand, just think about things that, if those of you who have children, who you give them something that you think is, nice to have, but they don't really understand the value of it. They don't understand the purpose of it. Sometimes you'll give your children a toy and they'll be playing with the box that the toy came in. So it's like they really can't conceptualize the sacrifice that you made and the things that went into making that product. They're just interested in having fun. And so a lot of times in life, we're like that. We're just so preoccupied with enjoying ourselves and having a good time that we misuse things. We misuse people. We misuse love. We misuse for our finances. When we don't understand why we have these things and how to properly use them, we'll eventually abuse them in one way or another. And so that goes with emotions. When you don't understand, when we think about money, when you think about all these different things about whether it be sex, love, money, relationship, anything that we have that we experience can be misused. Everything that God has given us, we have to be stewards over. We have to not just possess it, but we have to take care of it and maintain it so that it can be a blessing to us and not something that is harmful to us. Think of it like this. I shave, and I have to do that on a weekly basis. My son knows that I shave. He can't shave yet. Now, he may want a razor and he may think it's cool, but he doesn't understand the purpose of it. He doesn't have any reason to have it, and he's not mature enough to handle it. And so if I was to do that, first of all, I'd be a bad parent. Secondly, it could potentially hurt him really bad because he has no idea what he's doing with that thing. And so it's very important, like I said, that we understand the purpose of something, why it exists, how to properly manage it, how to maintain it. And so emotions are no different. And so let's define emotions. Emotions are a state of mind deriving from one's circumstances, and they're made up of three distinct components. The first component is a subjective experience. That's any situation that is processed through our five senses. So let me say that again. State of mind, because we're defining emotions. A state of mind deriving from one's circumstances, and it's made up of three components. That first component is a subjective experience. Any situation that is processed through our five senses. Now, I say subjective because it has to be something that you are encountering yourself. It's personal. Even if it's something that somebody else is experiencing, you being able to witness that is still even though you're not witnessing the exact thing that they're going through, you're watching them experience it, and there's an emotional reaction to that. That's still subjective. It's still something that you are experiencing. If you are unaware of what's going on, there can't be an emotional reaction to it. To give you a better example of that, have you ever been angry about something that you thought was going on, and then when you got more information, you realized that the thing that you were angry about wasn't actually happening? Well, the anger was real, but the information you got was incomplete or false. And so it's very important that that's why I said it's subjective, because it's your personal perspective, it's your personal experience. It's something that it's based on information that you're getting and that you're interpreting. So you might get the right information, but you might interpret it differently, or you might just get the wrong information. Sometimes people will lie, and you'll get mad because there was a lie told, and then you realize that, oh, okay, well, this had nothing to do with me, and so, but all the emotion that came with it was real. It was definitely real. So that's why we have to be very careful about allowing our emotions, and I'm jumping ahead of myself, but that's why we have to be careful about letting our emotions lead us, because it is subjective in nature. The second component that makes up emotion is a physiological response. Now we're going to start using so I want to break this down, because I know some of you might not be familiar with that word, but a physiological response is simply just increased heart rate, or sweating, or rapid breathing, or things like that. There's something going on the inside of you that is a reaction to what you have witnessed, what you have experienced. So the experience came first, and then the physiological response came second. So something happened. So it's like we're going to think external, internal. So something happened externally. That information came to us, we processed it internally, so now there's a physiological response, right? Just think about it like you ever get chased by a dog or something, right? Something is happening to you. You are having a negative experience. Now your body is going to have a physiological response. Your heart starts pumping real fast. It's called fight or flight, right? So it's like your heart starts pumping, your adrenaline starts moving. So it's like, and you either run or you try to find a way to defend yourself. But the point is, you don't have to think it through. It's not something you process. It's something that immediately starts happening physiologically just on the inside of you. It actually starts to happen to you whether you want it to or not. And the third one is a behavioral response. Now, the behavioral response is more, that now includes not just the physiological response, but now after you have processed what is going on, based on how you processed it, you're now going to have what we call a behavioral response. And so all that is the actual expression of emotion. Facial expressions, body language, tone of voice. These are things that come out of you based on how you interpreted the information. Now, going back to that first example I gave, if you have not interpreted the information correctly, though, the behavioral response might not be the appropriate response. Physiological response you can't control. If something scares you, you're going to have a physiological response, right? But think about it like this: it's like you're scared, so you have a physiological response. Your heart rate gets increases, and so you might start sweating, so on and so forth, right? And so that you have a response, and there has to be some type of reaction, right? But think about going to maybe a haunted house where that you are literally paying to go in a place where they're going to scare you. So check this out. Even though you are having a physiological response and you are literally scared, like there actually is fear, mentally it's not real. So to me that's more the best way to explain that, because there is actual fear. There is a physiological response, and your heart rate increases, so you're literally scared, but you know that Dracula is not really chasing you. You know that the werewolf is not running after you. That. And so the behavioral response, if it was a real, if there was a real situation where you were scared and you were scared for your life, you would not scream and then laugh afterwards, right? The laughter is because, oh wow, that was funny, that was good, or oh wow, you got me. You know what I mean? It's like like a prank or something. It's like that's the behavioral response that follows the physiological response. But if you were truly scared and what you processed was like you knew that it was real, like I'm in real danger, laughter would not follow. The behavioral response would be more like, I'm either going to fight my way out of this, I need to find a way to defend myself, I need to find a way to get out of here. The behavioral response would then match the physiological response. Now, why am I sharing all this with you? Because I want you to understand, because of these three parts, most of us stop at the physiological response. We don't take the time to process it. And I know that that's an extreme example with the haunted house, but I want you to think about it in the context of just everyday relationships. Think about how many times, like I said, you get some information from someone and that information is incorrect or inaccurate, right? Now you are responding based on what you think is happening. Your heart, again, the heart rate increases. You're getting upset about something that you feel like someone is doing to you. Someone said something to you in the wrong tone, or they were disrespectful, but you don't really know what's going on in their lives or what's going on behind the scenes. All you know is how it made you feel. And so sometimes we will stop right at that physiological response. We won't take the time to gather the appropriate information so we can have the appropriate behavioral response that is supposed to follow. So again, and this brings me to my next point, emotions were never meant to control you. They're actually meant to inform you. So the physiological response informs you of what you believe is happening. But again, just because it feels like something is happening doesn't mean that that's actually what's happening, right? they are like when your emotions, they are a reaction to how you are interpreting what you're experiencing. So if you are experiencing something, that's a fact. But what you are your interpretation of that experience is not a fact. It is subjective. It means it is personal. It's a perspective issue. That means that you can have an experience with your coworker, and I can have an experience with that same coworker. They irritate you, but they make me laugh. You see the difference? It's like we're having the same experience, but our interpretation of that experience causes two different behavioral responses. You don't like people who talk a lot. I'm think this person is hilarious. We're having two different behavioral responses to the same situation. So again, emotions are subjective, which is why we can't make decisions out of emotion, solely out of emotion. It doesn't mean that we can't use emotion. It doesn't mean that emotions are evil or anything like that. It just simply means that that should not be the basis for how you live your life. It's like everything it is emotional decision, because again, circumstances change, information changes. It's like, so if every time a situation changes, your decision changes, then you're gonna be someone who just flip flop. They're just one day you're up here, one day you're down here, one day you're over here, one day you believe this, next day you believe that. It's like, because the situation keeps changing, and we know that change is a part of life. You know what I mean? It's like, so we can't base everything based solely on those circumstantial things. It's like, no, let me use my emotions, just like in a practical situation, going back to the work thing. If you're at work and your boss is telling you to do something, and you just don't like the way your boss talks to you. Now other people might not have a problem with your boss, but they do, for whatever reason, your boss rubs you the wrong way. Nothing wrong with that in and of itself, but the proper behavioral response is to remain professional and to go ahead and do your work, and if you feel like some type of, unprofessional activity or, has taken place, you can go through the proper channels, but there's an appropriate behavioral response that should follow. We can't just be like, well, I felt like he was mean to me, so I'm gonna be mean back, or I'm not gonna do my job. Well, that is strictly a physiological. You are having a reaction and you're not responding appropriately. So when you understand how emotions are broken down and how it's supposed to be processed through your system, then you can respond appropriately. But ultimately, if you are not doing that, then you're always just going to be reaction. Everything is just a reaction. And so here's some ways to manage your emotions. So I've already kind of touched on it. Take the time to get the whole story. Okay? We respond to situations all day long from a certain perspective. It's a given. No matter how you feel about it, you have a certain perspective. You have different moods, you have a different perspective, you have different values, different things that you believe, and they all affect how you process information. So the majority of the time, that perspective is going to be your own perspective. It's like it takes effort to look at things from another person's perspective. So that's why you have to take the time to get the appropriate information, get the whole story, get other people's perspective. A person that is mature understands that they don't know everything, that they don't, aren't able to see every part of the story. Sometimes you need to close your mouth and listen to how other people feel about a situation, what happened and what's going on with them, and how it affected that experience that both of you had with each other. So there's actually a scripture that I want to share here. It says, James 1:19 says, let every man be quick to hear or understand, and slow to speak, respond. So it's like we have, even if you're not a believer, we have 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? That means you should listen twice as much as you talk. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory, right? Then there's other scriptures. We talk about Proverbs 18:23 that says, if one gives an answer before he understands, he is a fool and he should be ashamed of himself. That's Proverbs 18:23. It's like when you just react, when you just respond to something without thinking it through, without getting the appropriate understanding, the Bible says you're foolish. You're foolish. Proverbs 4:7 says, wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom, and with all you're getting, get an understanding. Wisdom is the principal thing. Wisdom is really just practical application of knowledge, getting knowledge, and then being able to use that knowledge in an effective way, right? Because just because you know something doesn't mean you respond correctly, right? It's like sometimes we respond incorrectly because we are having an emotional response in spite of the facts. It's like, well, I know you know, this happened and I know this happened, but I'm still angry. So now you just want to express your anger, right? And that leads me to my next scripture, which is Proverbs 18:2. It says, a fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. You know, a foolish person doesn't seek to understand. All they want to do is share how they feel. I just want people to know what I'm thinking, how I feel, what's going on with me. I'm not really concerned about your perspective, what you've been through. And that's a selfish person. You're self-centered when you can't conceptualize anybody else's needs or what they're going through apart from your own experience. So that's one of the ways you can manage your money. You got to take the time to get the whole story. Number 2, prayer. Obviously, prayer, our perspective and our understanding is limited. You know, it doesn't take a genius to know that. Seeking God's counsel provides a complete perspective and a practical application that brings the best results for everyone. Not just you, but for everyone. Proverbs 3:5-7 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and don't depend on your own perspective only. Acknowledge him in everything that you do and he will direct your path. There's nothing wrong with your perspective. He's saying, but don't lean totally on that, as you know, in and of itself. Like, don't lean on that only. It's like your perspective is not the only perspective. Your way of looking at things, your belief system is not the only way to process this or to go through this. And so God is the one that's all knowing. He's the one that's going to direct your path. Acknowledge him in everything that you do. He'll help you. And then I want to talk a little bit about the next one is confession or affirmation, which means being able to take authority over the feelings that you are by speaking how you are going to respond despite how you feel. Now, I want to explain this a little bit because some of you might not be familiar with this, because sometimes we pray for God to take feelings away, or we ask God to help us not to be angry with this person when they come around. It's like, no, God has given us the ability to, he's given us a spirit of self-control. So he's not going to take your emotions away, but what he will do, what he has done rather, is empowered you to not be controlled by your emotions. So the emotion itself is not wrong. The Bible even says, be angry and do not sin. You can experience that emotion and not have it cross over into doing something inappropriate. And so Proverbs 18:21 says, death and life are in the power of the tongue. You know, we hear that scripture all the time in church, but all that really means practically is you have the power to speak to yourself and say, this is what it's going to be. This is how I'm going to act. This is how I'm going to think. It's like you're the, what's the word I'm trying to find there? Think of your emotions like employees. You're the boss, they're the employees. They're reporting to you. They're not in charge. They're reporting information to you, but as the boss, you take into consideration what you have received, and then you have to make an informed decision based on that. So sometimes the appropriate response is anger. Sometimes the appropriate response is sadness or excitement or, whatever, is going on in the situation that is appropriate. But remember, you have to recognize what you feel. Don't demonize it. Recognize what you feel. And if it's not the appropriate response, then you need to speak to yourself and say, okay, I do feel angry about this, but I know that that's not appropriate in this scenario. I do feel saddened by this because that's a preference. Something goes down that we don't like, so we're saddened by it. Something goes down that we didn't approve of, and we're frustrated. It's like, but in the scenario, it might be the appropriate response to show frustration. For example, if I'm dealing with my children and I give them something and they break it, now I'm angry and I'm thinking about the money that was spent and I'm thinking about that, but is, screaming at them and hurting them because they've wasted this money the appropriate response? No. It's like, yes, you should discipline them, but not out of anger, not out of a place of rage and out of a place of, condemnation. It's like, no. It's like, I'm going to check you. I'm going to help you understand that what you did was wrong. But even though I'm feeling all this anger, that may not be the best way to handle the situation. And so I don't think that's hard to understand. I mean, it's like we do it all the time. When you're at work, you may want to yell at your boss, but you don't. You activate that principle all the time. You take the time to say, no, I feel this, but I'm going to do this. That's all I'm saying. It's like, this is what I'm feeling on the inside, and I recognize that I may not have all the information. So what I'm going to do is this. I recognize that this person said this to me, but I don't know what's going on in their life. I don't know what kind of day they've had. So this is how they made me feel when they said it, but this is how I'm going to respond. We do it all the time. So again, this is not a hard concept, but sometimes we don't activate this principle as much as we should. Sometimes we lose out on opportunities and blessings from God because we are reacting. We're just having a physical reaction to something. It's like just anger or rage or fear or it's like, no, it's like take the time to get the right information, pray, ask God for his counsel. How should I respond? And then speak to yourself, say, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to act. You know what I mean? And you can, and there's a time to deal with those emotions, but the proper management of that emotion is not just to share it. Just because you feel it doesn't mean you have to share it, because it's not always the appropriate thing to do. And so that's pretty much the end. The end result is what we call emotional intelligence, which is the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotions, and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and with empathy. And so the end result is relational. We're not just talking about this so that you can be a robot. That's not just like, well, I feel this, well, I'm gonna just be this way all the time. That's not really what we're talking about. It's really about understanding where you are, where someone else is, and then being able to connect with another person in a way that is not offensive, that you can understand where they're coming from, they can understand your perspective. You don't even have to agree, but our emotions don't have to take over the conversation. That's how conflicts and violence occur, because we don't understand how to manage our emotions correctly. So if you have any questions, like I said, please drop them below, and I'll be happy to address those for you. But we really need to learn how to manage these emotions. We cannot be just reacting to things. We have to take the proper time, get the proper information, and then respond appropriately. And that way we don't miss opportunities and blessings from God. And then, some people have lost jobs. Some people have lost their husbands and their spouse. I mean, they've burned bridges in relationships because they couldn't keep their mouth closed, because they were responding just with pure emotion. Feel the emotion, but respond accordingly and appropriately. All right. So thank you guys for tuning in. We're going to have a part 2 to this, so just tune in probably next week. Like we'll be dropping new videos every week. Again, if you want to follow us, we have other different things that we do on Facebook and on Instagram and Twitter. So follow us on all 3 of those, and you'll get some things. My wife has actually joined us on Facebook, and so we're actually doing a class, like an empowerment session, every Thursday at 7. So you can follow us on the BCM Weekly Empowerment Workshop. Go look for us on Facebook and join the group, and you'll be able to follow those discussions as well. So thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll